anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes,
to our favorite shows.
Oh, my circus.
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary Dog.
Pearson at Blurnsville.
Futurama.
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast TV party tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, for the first time, for the last time, we are talking about our favorite show, Fuller House, brought to you by the good people at Jeff Franklin Productions, Miller Boyette Productions, Warner Horizon Television, and Netflix. Yes, Jonas, how can I help you?
Sorry.
Are you? All right, joining me tonight, we are going to be discussing the second half of Season 5, the final season before this crew went off into the night. Ladies and gentlemen, this was kind of his idea, and this will be the last time we're doing this. We're going to move on to other stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, the punchy pugilist, Mr. Pat Mullin. How do you do, sir?
By the power of Grayskull, in the words of Reverend Joey McIntyre, I hope you always stay the same.
Indeed. So, let me ask you, how do you feel about the show, just in general, being over? You feel like it ran its course? Do you feel like there was more story left to tell? How do you feel?
I feel like they kind of rushed things a little bit as the ages of the kids progressed. And I feel like they're not going to be able to maintain the family dynamic when the kids are rightly going to go into colleges and careers, or at least start with Ramona and Jackson doing that. So I can understand a little bit of how they think the dynamic would change. I mean, by the time the first show ended, you had DJ graduating from high school, getting ready to go off to college, and that's where we left off. So, I kind of get the decision as to why it was made by that. I think there was more story to tell. I think there was more to flush out with the transition of the characters where we know the adults and it can focus more on the kids at a certain point. But I get it. All good things come to an end at one time or another, and this did.
Have you heard about Candace Cameron Bure or any other actors, or Jodie Sweetin, Andrea Barber? Have you heard about them wanting to go on to other things? Anything lined up or what?
Jodie Sweetin's very busy blowing up Instagram with, liberal rhetoric.
That's terrific.
Candace Cameron is always doing a Hallmark's Aurora Tea Garden series, so it's not like she doesn't have anything going on. She does a lot of fitness stuff on Instagram, which is pretty cool. Andrea Barber, if she does not have something else going on, I'm going to be very upset, because if anybody really won me over as like, wow, this person's really great during this show, it was her.
She's got quite a resume here. She's definitely got a lot of television, one episode here, one episode there, outside of Full House and this. I'm looking to see if she's got anything on her Wikipedia page, and she does not. After Fuller House started, she did an episode of Hollywood Darlings, which appears to have been uncredited, and she was on The Talk.
Well, yeah, Joe, that's right. Hollywood Darlings is the show that Jodie Sweetin has with Christine Lakin and Beverly Mitchell, but I haven't kept up with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if, now that she has some degree of profile coming out of the show, if... it's hard. She's a middle-aged woman now, but she's hilarious. So, I don't know. She was a kid when she started, which means she didn't go the stand-up route. I'd be curious to see if she could do stand-up. I'd give it a shot. I think it would be... I think... if she's at all... I don't want to say at all like her character, but... if she's as funny a person as she was a character on the show, I think if she could put together a stand-up routine, she'd be pretty amusing. I don't know. Maybe I'm just spitballing here. But... either way, it'll be... the kids, I'm sure... will all go on to other... they're all good-looking kids. I think we talked about... what's his name? The one who plays the middle child. Gosh, I'm losing names today.
Elias Harger.
Yeah. He started off a little pitchy, but he really came into his own on this show. And then the other two have always been fine. So I'm sure if they don't lock up something with like Disney or Nickelodeon or something, maybe they'll they'll find themselves in some actual like grown-up roles. Not doing the kid thing anymore. We'll see. Maybe we'll see them on a sitcom in a year or two on network television or or Hulu or something. So, going into the second half of Season 5, the first season debuted December 6, 2019, and then this last part of the season, episodes 10 through 18, debuted June 2nd. When we last left off, it was a modest proposal, and they did Dancing in the Street, and we were headed towards a triple wedding. What were your expectations going into part 2 of Season 5?
I felt like we were just not going to get triple wedding. I felt like they were going to do something along the lines of maybe one of the marriages would break up and they wouldn't go the full Monty with it. But yeah, and then I was curious to see what they would pull out, but they they kind of went in a certain direction, and we'll get there. But I had a feeling that they were going to break up the triple wedding plan.
Yeah, I kept waiting for this thing to fall apart. Quick on the subject of what do these people do, Candace Cameron Bure directed episode 14. She had directed an episode previous to that as well. Dave Coulier, who has a couple of appearances this season, directed episode 12. And Jodie Sweetin directed the Newlywed Game, the Newlywed Game episode 16. So we might see maybe some behind-the-camera action. Like Weird Al. You know that Weird Al, when he took a break from doing music and he was actually directing videos for a while?
Nope.
He did. He directed a video for Hanson, among others. How about that?
Oh, wow.
Weird Al, where have you gone? You're making fun of Gal Gadot. That's where you've gone. Have you seen that video yet?
No.
All right. So, these kids, in the short span between episodes 9 and episode 10, feel like they grew 5 years. Holy crap. Jackson shot up, looks like a goddamn man now. Like, he's still in high school. I think he's like a junior in this season. But he... I don't know how old the kid is in real life, but he went from looking like a little kid even as far back as the first part of season 5. And then when you see him at the beginning of this one, a full-grown man. I like, no wonder they're ending this thing. These kids look like they're ready to march off into the army. Ramona, not a major change, but still looking fairly grown up. But the one who really impressed me, the one who just shocked me with how grown up he looked, considering where we started, was Max. And especially the episode where he starts high school. They skip him a year and he starts high school, and he's in the shorts with the backwards hat. He also looked. I think they still had him as maybe 12, 13 years old, but Christ, he looked like he was 15 or 16. Just any thoughts on like how much the kids grew between seasons?
Yeah, Michael Campion went from being super lurchy and awkward to now actually looking like he fits his frame.
Yeah. I'm wondering if he put on some muscle.
I think he kind of had to. Max also, like you were talking about, grew into his head.
Yeah, he did.
He started off a little bit orange on a toothpick, and now he kind of fits his frame a little bit more too. He might have been an earlier bloomer than his TV brother there, where in the show, I think, I don't know when middle school starts. It starts different everywhere. Let's go with middle school starting as 6th grade, and that's when you're 11 years old. So right. He does not look 11 years old. He looks about 13.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, they toned him down a lot this season.
You mean he's not pre-gay?
Yeah, he's not Stewie on Family Guy. They toned everybody down. They toned all the kids down this season. Let's kind of go through this, because I want to get to some of the plots of the episodes, but I feel like we need to have some character discussions here. Because the three leads, DJ, Stephanie, and Kimmy, they're doing a lot of the same, and they're more reacting to circumstances. I want to talk about Steve, too, but we'll get there. But just kind of focusing on the kids for a second. One of the things that jumped right out at me, we'll start here, is how much Ramona changed. Like, her character changed over the course of 5 seasons. Because she started off, and I guess this follows for kids. You know, they're kind of embarrassed of their parents. They're kind of, my parents are the worst kind of a thing. And that's something we talked about previous seasons, where Ramona, a lot of the comedic tension was Andrea Barber was off the wall, and Ramona was kind of the straight man in that relationship. And somewhere between the last 2-3 seasons, she made a switch to where she started to embrace the nuttiness that was her family. And in this season, like, she's all in. Well, there was one thing I noticed with the second half of season 5 was that Ramona was absolutely all in on the Gibbler family nonsense. So, you know, you have the episode at, like, Thanksgiving where they're running around like pilgrims, and she looks happy as a clam. You have, I think, there was something else where the family was doing a bit, and she could not be happier being a part of it. Like, she really accepted her place in this very overdramatic family. And I'll tell you, it made her character less grating. Like, I kind of liked the fact that she was fully a part of the Gibbler family nonsense instead of playing the straight man to Andrea's comedian. What'd you think?
Well, how teenage and angsty can you be for how long?
Right.
At a certain point, especially when your parents are inherently not bad to you at all.
Right.
They're just a little eccentric. You know, people bitch about My So-Called Life getting canceled after, 2 seasons? What the hell else were you going to do with it?
Yeah. I think people get that, the old adage about your children get replaced by aliens for a while because they're so moody and angsty and everything. But I think as a television audience, it gets old after a while, like you're saying. And so they needed to switch gears with her, or I think the audience would have turned on her. To a degree, same thing with Jackson. Jackson has been the lovable goof for most of the series, and they did a lot of work with him about not feeling like he could live up to Max, his smarter, younger brother, feeling like he didn't have an identity. And this season, they gave him a lion's share of confidence. I mean, the stuff with the computers, and I like the episode where they go to the college, and him and his mother steal the graduation cap, I think it is. And they use that as a vehicle to establish that college probably isn't going to be for him, but he has a future in computers. He naturally gets it, which plays off of his degree of accomplishment within. Well, they talked about most of the series. The thing that he did the best was video games. So, not that everyone who plays video games is also a computer nerd, but one can flow to the other if you've got a talent for it. And they wrote him as having a talent for it, and I like that about Jackson. I like the fact that they didn't spend most of the season with Jackson feeling sorry for himself. They gave him some confidence, and they gave him more of a personality than just the family goof. So what are your thoughts on Jackson?
Again, Idiot Savant was where I was going with it. Because in addition to, the established eventual, computer technology knack that he has, he's also apparently a very talented singer, which we find out.
Yes, that was funny.
So yeah, again, I think idiot savant is a good thing to describe him as, because he really lacks very, very basic common sense in most of the things he deals with, and despite that, is still successful in certain ways. And when he does happen to find a knack for something, he doesn't even essentially understand at first what that is or what it means to him, and that, hey, this is probably what your future is going to be based around this.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job with him. I have to say, all the kids were really less great. This was the least grating they've been in the entire season, and I think we've kind of gone back and forth about this. You and I, especially in the beginning, and he's a child, so I think it was tempered by the fact that he is a child, and we didn't want to just bash the kid. But Elias Harger as Max Fuller, he really came into his own this season, and this is probably my favorite season he's been in, because he actually showed some vulnerability. He isn't Ricardo Montalban for the entire season. He isn't this midget man about town. Like, especially the episode where he just gives up his identity so that he can fit in better in high school. I was like, that's probably the most vulnerable they've ever made him. And then towards the end, where they, it's sort of running out of time, so they kind of have to tie up the loose ends with him and Fernando, and they, just outright say that these two were the two that were connected, and and he talks about missing Fernando and how just like how Joey and Dave Coulier's Joey and Jesse had a special bond with the girls. Fernando had a special bond with Max. He's kind of the only one that really got him, outside of maybe his mother. So I liked a lot of what they did with Max. I really have no complaints about any of the kids this season, but I especially liked what they did with Max.
They made him into an actual person in this season.
That might have been what I liked about it.
Yeah. That's the big difference. They made him a real person with feelings and vulnerabilities, like you said, and emotions and failures that he has to face and understand how to overcome.
Yeah. The one thing I was kind of rolling my eyes at is when they're in the tuxedo store and he doesn't have enough brains to not insult the tailor.
Well, he's also, 12 years old, maybe 11.
I know. And so it isn't a total, like, cringe, eye-roll, fast-forward moment. It was just kind of one of those, like, it felt like we were moving in a direction, and we went a little backwards. And then we moved forward again. Which I guess is fine in television, but you know me, I don't like to go backwards. Always forward. Always forward, Pat. Talking about the kids, they gave a lot to Steve Hale, who's, of course, going to be DJ's husband by the time the season's over. We're done with the boyfriend wars. He's firmly established as the fiancé. And now it's kind of a race to the end to see if this fairy tale is going to end with the two of them being together. And up to this point, again, he was used as sort of a gag here or there, a plot device. I've come around on the Steve character because, again, he was kind of there for, like, sandwiches and, some of the romance stuff, but I didn't feel like they gave him a character beyond that. And this season, he has a lot of really funny lines. My favorites are the parts where he's trying very hard to fit into this oddball family, and occasionally he has this moment of, I'm a middle-aged man. Why am I listening to a child? And he says something to that degree a couple of times throughout the season, and I laughed every time he did, and I was like, yeah, Steve, stand up for yourself, God damn it. Because that's the other thing, is that I think he's trying to find his place in this family, and they deal with that early on with him and Jackson, and the father's, the dead father's event suit that they're, and the old card of cleaning out a closet to find a place for this new person, that sort of thing. Very symbolic. But they gave him a spine. He's not as romantic as he is. He's not totally doting on DJ. And he's trying to find his place with the kids while still, I feel like, staying true to whatever character they wrote for him. So I thought he was very strong this season.
I would agree. A lot of what they did with him was rely on people's knowledge of his past on Full House, I guess would be the word to use. And they didn't develop him further than that, other than establishing he has a career, he's been divorced. He's kind of essentially there to be dressing for DJ in most of his appearances up to this point. There's a little bit of guy bonding here or there in the previous seasons with him and Matt in a very superficial surface way. Same thing with Fernando and Jimmy. But here, where there's been more of a connection between him and really more Jackson than anyone else, because at least in the past they'd established that he and Max had bonded, over this television show that they liked. And now that it's getting real to the point where there's going to be a wedding, he's moving into the house, he's marrying Mom, there needed to be a little more gravity to the relationships between them. And I think they did a very good job establishing that, maybe more than anything by letting him kind of carry it. Because I think Scott Wanger is just very good in this role and comes off as a very nice, earnest guy. And I think more than anything, sometimes you need that just to play to the strengths of what you're trying to do. And no matter how well you write something, if the person can't convey that, it's not going to be effective. But I think he's just very good at that.
Yeah, he has also a lot of nice guy charisma. He's clearly not like an over the top character. He's not a Nick from Family Ties for all of you also middle aged men out there. He's not a Kimmy. He's not like an eccentric. He's also not a dope. He's not a Joey from Friends. He's also not a Mark from Roseanne, if you want to throw another one of those out there. Right. Like, he's a smart, talented, knowledgeable, earnest, good fella. And other than the fact that he's had his heart, stomped on once or twice, and, what he did to the first fiancé was not great when he still had feelings for DJ. He's not a bad dude. Like, you really, I feel like it's rare on TV these days, and maybe I'm just talking about my own experiences, but I feel like, especially with the kind of stuff I watch, but I just feel like it's very rare that you find somebody at least a television sitcom where you are 100% rooting for them because they're just genuinely good people. And that's what he is. He's not perfect. Nobody is. But when the show revolved around which way was DJ going to go, Matt or Steve, I think they wrote him in such a way where it would be unless you're just physically attracted to Matt, and who wouldn't be, how could you not root for Steve? He's just a good dude,
That's the thing. When that's conveyed properly, everybody kind of gets won over. And I think initially a lot of the viewers wanted to see the relationship explored with Matt because it would have been something new, different. It's not just kind of returning back to what it was in the original sitcom. But ultimately, I think, especially based on, again, Scott Wanger and what he brought to the table, I think it's the right call.
I'm wondering how much of the show was written around the fact that as the audience saw him, they fell in love with him, and a lot of this was written, towards, well, what do the fans want? I mean, we're not making high art here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, again, if we go back to season, 2 and 1, Matt was given a lot more than Steve was during that time. And again, probably because, one, most of the people watching were probably already at least familiar with Steve and his teenage iteration, and Matt was a new character as a whole. But at the same time, it's also one of those things where I think they definitely had the intent of going with Matt, and viewer reaction tended to just lean stronger towards Steve.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. So that wraps up that part of the family and those characters, which I didn't want to end the podcast without talking about. Let's get into the individual episodes here. Before we do, just a quick question. Did you miss Aunt Becky? Aunt Becky's got troubles. She couldn't be on this season, so you didn't get Joey and his family, thank God, because that gag was one time too many. Didn't really get a lot with Danny, but Danny didn't necessarily have an established girlfriend or secondary family or anything. So really the only other secondary family was Jesse and Aunt Becky. And Aunt Becky's got troubles in River City. Did you miss her?
Yeah, Mom's not feeling well, so she had to go take care of her in Nebraska.
Yes, sir.
Right by that nice state correctional facility.
Did you think the show lost anything without Lori Loughlin?
Not necessarily. What Lori Loughlin brought to the original show was basically the mother character for these three girls who didn't have one, and kind of humanized and made John Stamos' Jesse less of a, degenerate rebel and turned him into more of a family man. That's not really needed here. So she kind of, her purpose is much less needed. So I don't think we really lost anything, especially with the show drifting away from relying on the cameos from the original adult cast, as it were.
All right, so we talked about the episode at the Suit Fitch, which is our season premiere. And this is the bit where they're trying to move stuff around to fit Steve into the house. They find Dad's old suit, which causes Jackson to have a bit of a reaction. But as you would. This is not one of those where I faulted the child for their ridiculous reaction. I thought this was in line with, I think, how a kid would react. It was a great bonding episode for Steve and Jackson, like we talked about. But the other thing that happens here is we are led to believe that the Gibblers, for the first time, are going to be shown on TV. And it's alluded to that they're a bit flaky. They're world travelers. They're not, they haven't really been a part of their kids' lives in the last 20 years or so. And there's an attempt to bring them in for the engagement party, but they don't show. And this is really kind of a Trojan horse to build up a relationship for Kimmy and Joey, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if the original show, you can kind of fill in the gaps for me here, if there was anything with Kimmy and Joey in the first iteration of this show, but I thought if you're going to establish Kimmy with another character, Joey was a good fit.
Oh, I would agree with that. In a lot of ways, and even in a previous episode of the original series, Danny basically makes the acknowledgement to DJ that Kimmy is her Joey. So they're almost spiritual successors to that in that way, to the lead characters of the original series and the familial ties that are shared with them. In addition to Joey having, parental issues where he had a father who was never around and didn't come to his important events and ultimately disagreed with his lifestyle as a comedian. So it made sense from a narrative perspective. It gave Joey a role to fill in that wedding along with, Danny and the rest of the guys.
The second episode, 3 Weddings and a Musical. Now, here's what I was afraid of. I asked you what did you think we were going to get with this season? I tend to agree with you. I figured by the time this was all over, somebody wasn't getting married. Something was going to happen. What I was afraid of was going to happen this season was that this was going to be one long series of wedding gags. Like, there was a joke about Game of Thrones about when are the dragons coming, and South Park did a goofy thing on it, like, they're coming soon, eventually, we're almost there. And I thought, like, that's how this wedding was going to be. Like, fuck, every episode. every episode. I can't get away from this stupid wedding, and they only did it twice. Thank God. And I have to say, the 2 times that they did it, where they addressed the wedding, were kind of funny. They didn't overdo it. They didn't overstay the wedding stuff. Didn't overstay its welcome, and they left and they went on to other stuff. They dealt with other issues. For a while there, they kind of forgot there was a wedding, which I was happy about. And so this episode is all about the wedding. And the whole concept is that you have these 3 women with 3 wholly different ideas of what a wedding should be. Having planned 2 of them for myself, and having worked in catering while I was in college and got to see a lot of weddings, boy, did this ring true to me. I don't think my wife would have ever have thought that we would get a reading from Metallica lyrics at her wedding, but she married me, and that's what she got. So I get the idea that one person's idea of what a wedding should look like might not match anybody else's, including the person they're marrying. And they had a lot of fun with it this episode. My God, those bridesmaids' dresses they model at the end were some of those wacky-tacky, god-awful things I've ever seen. I mean, I'm sure you've been to a wedding or two and seen some god-awful, as if the bride purposely put her bridesmaids in awful-looking bridesmaids' dresses. But I feel like even for the writers of this show, they went to the clown store to find these dresses. Just the worst. But I thought the episode was funny. Hiding Fernando in the bag. And some of the stuff that he does at the expo was mildly amusing. So what did you think of this one?
Fernando. Just they seem to always find a way to shoehorn him into doing something just ridiculous, and I crack up at it. And this was probably the zenith of that for me, with him hiding out in the bag, and then all of a sudden, not just doing that, but modeling the tuxedo. And are you wearing makeup, Fernando?
Yeah, I was very amused by this. This are the stuff that happens at home, but it's kind of meh. It's more bonding with Steve and the kids. This was also the bit where Ramona and Jackson are competing for a part in the play, which I thought was a weird way to go. I just talk about that for a second. They establish here that Jackson's going to be the lead in this, and I guess it's a plot device so that later on the payoff can be, I love you, you're my sister, I love you, you're my brother, and it kind of revolves around them competing for the spot. I just thought it was a weird choice.
It kind of snuck up on you out of nowhere. It was never something that was established. This was even a thing. And you go back to the point where they really were pushing Ramona as if her future was all about going to be performing arts, whether it was dancing, singing, etc. And that had cooled off pretty substantially. And now all of a sudden it's back in play, and just like that, she's just cut completely out from underneath it by the idiot savant singer.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many scenes of Ramona. That seems to be her life. There was an entire season just dedicated to her wanting to get into this performing arts school. And then it was as almost if people just got sick of it with her. And they were like, well, people hate it. Let's take it away from her. Okay, but then she had, nothing to do the rest of the season. She has the one bit with the sandwich eating, which was mildly amusing. But, that's it.
Yeah, I don't know why all of a sudden the drastic pullback on her character, other than they just, I don't know. Maybe they ran out of ideas, because that's sure what it seems like.
Yeah, they really hit the wall with her. Next episode is the Thanksgiving episode. So, all right, Pat, you have a memory like a fucking elephant. I love it. It's fantastic. You and Robert Winfrey have this ability to dredge up detailed memories that I couldn't even. I mean, you've done enough podcasts with me. I'm good with the general, not great with the detail. That's what I depend on the rest of you all for. tell me about this episode. What happened when Stephanie backed up Joey's car into the kitchen? Because this Thanksgiving episode plays off of that flashback. And might I say, I can't believe they didn't show it. Like, they've used footage from the show before. I don't know why they didn't hear.
I'm so shocked they didn't show that original clip. This actually plays off of 2 episodes. It also goes back to our very first Thanksgiving, which is a first season episode. Stephanie doing the car in the kitchen deal, I believe, is season 2. Might have been season 3, but I think it's season 2. And basically, Stephanie's not getting any attention from anybody at the time, doesn't know what to do. Joey is super proud of this car, Rosie, that he's restored, and decides he just needs one little bit of touch-up paint to make it perfect, so he goes out. Stephanie decides to just go into the car, and she's going to listen to the radio, and she touches the gear shift and decides that R must mean how you turn on the radio, drops it into reverse, and all of a sudden, car in the kitchen.
Wow. What was she, 7, 8 years old when she does this?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Between that and then between our very first Thanksgiving, where the big thing is the girls want to make this pie that their mom had always made, and they screw it up, and DJ's in hysterics because it's the first Thanksgiving without their mom, and so a little bit of that mixed in here, a little bit of that, a little bit of almost what looks like a Breaking Bad episode with how they have this lab restored up in the top of the house.
Yeah, that was amusing. So the whole premise here is that Stephanie wants to make Thanksgiving, but she won't use any of the old recipes. She wants to do new things. Boy, is this an issue in my family. You've got people like me who's like, turducken, let's do this, let's do that, let's break it up. And then there's my wife and her family, which are the traditionalists. You know, it's always been this way, it's always going to be this way, and we ain't fucking changing it for nobody.
And then you got people like my family, Mark, where we all agree that turkey's dry and nasty, so let's just eat a lasagna.
My Italian grandmother would be very proud.
Gotta have an antipasto.
Indeed. So the whole thing here is, DJ, who is a control freak, doesn't want to let go of the family tradition. This came up in the wedding episode too, where there's a lot of the comedic tension, a lot of the dramatic tension between the two sisters is, Stephanie having an identity and a personality of her own and wanting to have her own life, and DJ being extremely type A. Then therein lies the funny. And so here that's expressed in DJ setting up a mash unit kitchen so they can make the traditional dishes. Yes, sir. Well, meanwhile, Stephanie's down in the kitchen doing all kinds of...
And that's after mash.
Yes. Doing all kinds of watercress salads and whatnot. And, of course, she's
making Spago Thanksgiving.
And so, of course, DJ is found out, and Stephanie says, fuck this shit. And she gets into the car and, of course, forgets how to drive, apparently, and backs into the house. Any thoughts on this episode besides what we've already talked about?
I don't know why. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and I forgot the B plot. Dad and the uncles get trapped in the freezer at Monty's, which...
Yes, that would be the plot of the Trapper John portion of our MASH series.
Yeah, go ahead. Talk about it.
Again, just to play off of the old version of the show, as Danny, Joey, and Jesse are all trapped in this, what really puts them over the edge? Jesse starts losing his hair.
They had a really weird reveal here, which I guess the writers felt like if we're going to have these guys on the show, we should give them more than sight gags. So they gave him a little bit of dramatic tension to where Danny admits he didn't want Joey to move in initially, which was not the sense you ever got from the show.
It was more the sense that you got that from watching Joey on the original run of the show.
That he didn't want to move in?
No, that why would you ever want this guy to move in anywhere? He's just a train wreck.
So, I mean, and that was the weird thing about that particular bit of tension, that particular bit of fighting, was that you have Danny, who makes a logical point. You're a stand-up comedian. You keep weird hours. I just needed people to watch my kids. Like, I didn't think this was going to be a good fit. And, and of course, Joey's feelings are hurt because he did give up that life. I believe he gave up stand-up for a while. And I know him and Jesse eventually went into making jingles, if I remember correctly. But he gave up a big part of his life to be home with the girls, and I think he was feeling taken advantage of and not feeling appreciated. Which,
yeah, well, he got somewhere nice to live rent-free for years. Shut up, Joey. Asshole.
You'll get no sympathy from Pat.
Terrible stand-up comedy.
He was doing
Joey, not Dave Coulier. Dave Coulier is actually very funny, and I highly recommend him if you're looking for like a night with like the kids and family to have like something funny you can all watch and be acceptable.
Can you even find any of his stand-up anymore?
Probably not without looking through the used CD bin. That being said, I will recommend that he is funny for families, and that's okay. There needs to be some of that. Unlike Jim Brewer, who's just not funny for anybody anymore.
Jim Brewer got fat.
And not funny.
Yeah.
Ironic that he got fat after he stopped smoking weed, though, because you would think with the munchies and everything he'd have put on the pounds. But nope, he got chubby.
They say if you replace one vice with another vice, so, yeah. I'm guessing he ate his feelings, as it were. But enough about Jim Brewer. So the next episode is... By the way, up to this point, you're not getting a lot of Kimmy. We haven't really talked about her a bunch. My wife asked me if Kimmy was pregnant on the show, and I said, well, she was pregnant all the previous season, I think it was, or the season before that. But yeah, she was looking really... And this is not a negative comment on her body shape. I'm not body shaming the woman. This is an observation. I don't know if she actually was pregnant this season, or if this is post-baby weight from an actual pregnancy, but she was looking really thick this season. And they tried to dress it away, but, between the camera and some of those outfits, it did not work in most cases.
Yeah, well, I know that she didn't have an actual pregnancy with her on-screen pregnancy last year, but I think she's got 2 kids that are like in their teen years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe she was going through a pregnancy again. I don't know if it's just the wardrobe choices they dressed her in and things of that nature weren't necessarily flattering. I see that point too.
I distinctly remember saying to you that Kimmy Gibbler was hotsy-totsy the first couple of seasons of this show. And not that she's an unattractive woman, but I'm just saying, even my wife noticed she looked like she got heavier this season, and I don't quite know why. Not that it matters.
Mark, do you remember Hotsy Totsy?
Do I remember Hotsy? I remember Tootsie.
No, Hotsy Totsy.
What's Hotsy Totsy?
Wait, really?
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
I remember Bosom Buddies.
No, Hotsy Totsy was a character on Welcome Back, Kotter, whose name was Rosalie Totsy, but she was reputed to be very easy and was thus called Hotsy Totsy, and made an appearance in one episode saying that she was pregnant so that all the sweat hogs would admit that none of them had actually slept with her, so they weren't going to take responsibility for being the dad.
I watched a lot of Welcome Back, Kotter, but not all of it, so I don't remember that episode. I do remember every third episode it seemed like Kotter was doing something out of the box with his sweat hogs, and the principal was always yelling, "You can't do that," like repeatedly.
Vice, we never saw Principal Lazarus.
Whoever was yelling at him, Vice Principal, whatever the character's name is. Christ, there was only 2 adult characters on the show.
Yes, Mr. Woodman.
All right, college tours up next. This is so the whole deal here is, speaking of Kimmy, so she's still doing the helicopter parenting, enmeshed mother-daughter thing with with Ramona. And Ramona, what I love about Ramona and Kimmy is, and Ramona just outright says it, you've given me confidence, you've raised me well, you've given me the ability to separate myself. That's what a parent is supposed to do. so let me separate. And of course, a lot of Kimmy's identity is wrapped up in overparenting Ramona, but as much as Kimmy, I think, tried, they wrote Kimmy down just enough to make her tolerable to the audience, to where, like, some of her more eccentric personality stuff that she does isn't so overbearing. In other words, she does the gag for a little while about wanting to be up Ramona's behind and not wanting her to leave the San Francisco area. But when when they get to that point in the episode where she has to make a turn, Kimmy makes the right decision and behaves correctly, and it's a very heartwarming moment. This is also the episode where Jackson figures out he wants to go into computers and doesn't need 4 years of college for that, can just go to a technical school. And Candace Cameron Bure is quite the gymnast. You know what I mean, Pat?
Yes, I do.
So what do you think of this episode?
I liked it. I thought, for everything else, the idea of Jackson actually establishing that he does have a plan for his life and not just simpleton idiot who's going to, walk away from whatever and just think it's going to work out fine, was necessary, based on how he's been painted. Again, I love the idea of this floating back to an earlier episode of the show's previous, or its predecessor, Full House, where Joey and Danny had to go to a sorority party and reunion in drag to steal back their old fraternity mascot that they lost that got them kicked out of their fraternity. So the idea of that was kind of fun, showing how much the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The idea of Stephanie being smart enough to just send all the guys out on a wild goose chase for tuxedos was funny. And the Max involvement that we talked about earlier, I laughed at it. It was just enough of his previous character injected into himself now to show that he hasn't grown up that much that fast.
Yeah.
So I was fine with it. And then Stephanie eventually just realizing she can't have a nice day and has to get called in on it. That was funny.
Yeah. I don't think there's an episode of this season I just outright didn't like.
Well, we'll get there.
Well, here's the funny thing about this show, and I'll say this now, but we'll explain it later. This was like a almost flawless gymnast floor routine. Every move where it should be, the music is right, everything is right, and right at the end, right as the floor routine's about over, the person just falls the fuck right off the mat. Just on their face. Face plants, Pat. On the mat, you don't know what the hell happened. It was all going so well. What was that?
Not a pretty sight.
No, sir. All right. So the next one is kind of a throwaway episode. This is we talked about it before. I don't know how much more we need to say about it, but Max is going to middle school from elementary school. He's skipping a grade. So he's skipping, I think, like 5th to going to 6th, we'll say, or 7th, whatever, however they're handling it. And of course, he dresses like a banker, which gets him made fun of, and so he decides to not only change his look, but change his demeanor. And there's a whole heart-to-heart about being true to yourself. And, they talk about how had Kimmy tried to fit in, DJ would have never have found her, which I thought was a nice sentiment, that the people who you're supposed to be with in life will find you. I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago about podcasting and blogging and whatnot, and I said, even if nobody listens to these shows, the thing about podcasting is this is where all my friends are. And they're all over the country. In some cases, they're in another country. But without podcasting, I wouldn't know these people and I wouldn't have these friends. So they were right.
We're talking to you. Congratulations on the new baby.
So the point being, the people that should be in your life, you'll find each other. But you got to stay true to yourself. It's hard for people to find you when you're not there, so to speak. So I like the sentiment. I liked what what they did with him. I thought they'd hang on to it for a little longer, but it only lasted an episode. This is also the one where Ramona does the sandwich eating contest.
Yes, against David. Oh no, not David, just Berkowitz.
Yes, he's not the son of Sam. Anything about that? Because this was one of those where I think they were just, as we said before, they were just struggling to come up with something for Ramona to do, and they were like, "Fuck it, eat sandwiches."
So here's the thing, and I don't know if this was a needed lesson for a lot of girls in this position, because I wasn't one, so I don't know. I don't know if a lot of girls feel self-conscious about eating in front of boys they like.
I will tell you that many do.
Okay, so Mark knows that many do. That being said, if you are, on the hefty side, I get it. I'm not saying it's sad that you have to feel that way. I'm also not saying it's sad if you decide you want to better yourself by eating a little more conservatively and, maybe looking into a treadmill or something. That's cool too. You do you. I will tell you that if you are a girl who is in the body type of Sony Nicole Bringus, where you're very slender and fit, eating a lot in front of a guy is really, really awesome. We kind of dig that because then we don't have to act all controlled and whatever. And it's really great. Do that. Do a lot of it while balancing it.
Yeah. Look, I think most guys will tell you they just want to be out with a girl who's willing to have some fun. And, some people have fun going bowling. Some people have fun sharing a meal.
Some people have fun in the backseat of a 1968 rusted out El Camino.
This is also true. The point is, ladies, it's a lot of... And they just posted this on one of the psychology Facebook pages that I follow. That what women think men want is not what men want. And contrary to popular opinion, what men think women want is not that either. That they
You mean money?
We have... well, that's true. We have wild misconceptions of what the other one wants, which I'm sure attributes to a lot of why there's not a lot of meaningful connections being made in the dating world these days. The dick pics probably don't help. Let me just throw that out there. Anyway, I'll get off my dick pic podium. We'll move on to Be Yourself, Free Yourself. Like I said, we haven't had a lot of Kimmy this season. She took a backseat to a lot of what other stuff was going on. But this is one where this was all Matt, Kimmy, and DJ, and it's essentially Kimmy's too eccentric to hold down a regular job. She's too ADD, she's too addle-brained, and so it's kind of a Three's Company type episode. Okay, for you kids out there, Three's Company, a lot of the humor was set up in a situation being just zany and out of control, and no one talks to each other, and stuff like that. Essentially, DJ doesn't want to hurt Kimmy's feelings, and Kimmy is nuts, so Kimmy keeps doing wild and crazy things in the veterinary clinic. And then there's Matt in the middle, who doesn't want to upset DJ, but doesn't want Kimmy there, because he's trying to run a fucking business. Hilarity ensues. What'd you think of this one?
Hey, kind of a breather episode, I guess you'd call it, where to take away from the seriousness of gravity and of these situations, let's just have some stupid laughs.
Yeah.
And let's let Andrea Barber just go wild because she's been so good at it.
Yeah, this was definitely one where I think they were sitting in the writer's room, and they're like, has anyone realized we haven't given Andrea Barber anything to do this season? Oh, all right, well, let's give her an episode where she just does stuff. Great. This was also the Playdate episode, where the kids,
yes,
with Jesse's
adopted... Johnny Stamos, too.
Yeah, Jesse's adopted daughter bit herself, but of course she doesn't want to admit that because she's a child. And so Jesse assumes somebody else bit her and establishes a play date with a bunch of the kids in town so that he could play some detective work and figure out which one bit this kid. But other than that, this is the return of the hipster dad. I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone like this, and I know a lot of parents. I guess they exist, but
Yeah, move to my neighborhood, Mark.
okay. A lot of douchebag hipster parents, Pat.
You got to hear some of the things I hear on the bus and the subway.
So this guy was all too familiar to you.
He's very real.
Okay, fair enough. Any one thing you want to say about the play date?
I think more than anything, this was an opportunity to have fun with John and Josh because they did have good chemistry. And if you don't know, they had a show on Fox together called Grandfather that only ran for one season. Sadly, was not a ratings winner, but there was fun interplay between the two of them, and I think a lot of people really did like it. So I think it's one of those things where it's a fun kind of bridging of generations. Because if you grew up with Full House and John Stamos and you remember how big he was then, and you have the generation of people who were kids watching that grew up with Josh Peck on his Nickelodeon show Drake and Josh, and then the two of them together and growing, it's just a fun little tie-in.
The next episode is the Nearly Wed Game. This is classic 80s sitcom stuff right here.
And yet another callback to the original show.
Do tell.
So there's an episode in I believe it's season 7 of the original show, where Joey actually gets an audition to host a game show that is one very typical of the many knockoffs of the Newlywed Game that we had seen. And the couples on the show are supposed to be a married couple, an engaged couple, and a dating couple. So Steve and DJ are the dating couple. Jesse and Becky are the married couple. And Danny and Vicky are supposed to be the engaged couple, but Vicky can't make it because she got an offer to anchor the network news in New York, and she can't do it. So Danny ends up paired with some lady named Estelle, and hijinks ensue. Not unlike this episode.
It was fun. Again, kind of a throwaway episode. Nothing really is gained or learned here. It doesn't really advance anything. But it's the second episode that deals directly with the wedding. And I think the amusing thing about it for me was having, the interplay between these characters we've gotten to know so well. So you have the type A couple who know everything about each other. You have the couple that... We've said it from the beginning that Stephanie and... what's his nuts? What's the fiance? Jimmy, yeah. So many J's in this show. Stephanie and Jimmy, they have kind of just almost like a fly-by-night, artsy, Soho type relationship where they don't know intimate details about each other like DJ and Steve do, but they're passionate. There's a romantic passion about them, and they have Kimmy and Fernando, who are just they're Lucy and Desi. They're just funny. They're there for laughs. They're always amping up the antics, and they do it well. And so therein lies the comedic tension. You have these three different types interacting with each other, and hilarity ensues. But I think the funniest part of this for me was even the Max as the host, and some of the faces Ramona makes as they're trying to get their way through this. The kids did a good job of using their camera time, such as it was, well in this episode. Anything else about the Newlywed Game?
No, I think that's, again, just a fun little wink nod to longtime fans and a way to kind of just get the varied extreme levels of the couples involved.
The bit at the end with Jimmy where he's dancing, was that a callback to the original series?
No, that's just Jimmy.
Okay. I thought that was a reference of some kind.
I don't remember it being one.
Stephanie didn't dance that way?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Now I know what you're referring to. So there's a telethon episode done in season 3 of the original series. I really blanked out for a second on that. I'm sorry. where she does a dance to fill time to the song Love Shack. And Jimmy wears basically the same outfit that she wore as a, 7 or 8 year old girl dancing to Love Shack.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Our last 2 episodes here. Debated whether or not I was going to get personal with this, but Something Borrowed.
This isn't going to be a story about your dog, is it?
Go fuck yourself.
Speaking of callbacks.
Yeah. No, I don't want to get off on a too much of a tangent here. So suffice it to say, if you've been listening to us for a while, you know I'm having some health issues, and I've had 1 or 2 brushes where I didn't know if things were going to get dramatically worse for me. We'll just go ahead and say that. And I have 2 young kids, and that's the point. They're 9 and 6 right now. So Stephanie has this revelation in this episode. Here's the parallel. That mom died when she was very young. And she realizes that she doesn't have a lot of memories of her as a child, that she's starting to forget what she does remember, and she doesn't have much else because the mother died when she was 5, 6 years old. Well, my son's 6, and the thought that something might happen, and years from now, my son's saying, "I don't remember my dad," or "I'm losing the memories I had of my dad," because he's a middle-aged man and shit happens. Really, everybody's going to react to the show differently, and everyone's going to take something different. Maybe you've had something personal happen to you or someone you know, and it's reflected in the show, and you have a reaction. Well, this was mine. Broke my heart to hear Jodie Sweetin as Stephanie talk about death and losing their mother and memories and holding on to a connection. It was lovely to see DJ kind of stepping in as a motherly character to Stephanie, and this is all revolving around something new, something borrowed, something blue that you do as a bride for a wedding. And so I think specifically they're talking about their mother's veil. And this ends, I believe, with them in the ice cream parlor where their mom used to take them. And it's the one memory that Stephanie has. I really struggled with this episode for my own personal reasons, and I don't expect everybody to have that same reaction or anything else like that. Just know that this one of a show that is fairly light was very heavy for me, and it was very difficult for me to watch for very, very personal reasons. So I'm going to put that aside for now, because we're doing review, not diary. But I think it's important for people to know that was my take on this episode, that, this one found very personal strings of mine to pull on. What did you think of the Something Borrowed episode?
I thought it gave good gravity to situation, where we've had a lot of goofy hijinks, but as we're getting to the end of the show, there's obviously very much the idea that they want to have the sentimentality and the feeling there. So I could definitely see, why they wanted to have an episode like this. I thought it was well played out where, I think what's the age, Mark? Is it 3 that they say that most people start retaining memory?
Yeah, between 3 and 4. Right.
So, again, you think about it from a perspective, and maybe you want to disqualify it and be like, well, she has 2 years of memories of her mom. And is that really that many? How much, for a lifetime versus 2 years?
Right. And again, Stephanie is not 18. She's not 28. And she's got to be in her mid to late 30s, if not 40s.
She'd be in her, if the timeline is, accurate, which I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say it is, she would be about...
She's 38 now in real life.
You said she's how old?
38.
That would be the age of her character as well, 38.
So, I mean, you don't retain your memories over time. Maybe you do, but the rest of us
No,
mortals.
there's stuff I've pushed out, and believe me, there's no excuse as to why I should remember it as much as I do based on blows to the head and alcohol.
Indeed. But look, in all seriousness, it's a very real thing, and we don't have to talk about my personal life, but I mean, lots of kids had memories of their parents, their early childhood that they've just forgotten. Why would your brain's only got so much space to store stuff, and as you get older, it's hard to hold on to those things because it's even harder to make room for new information. So, from a personal standpoint, from a dramatic standpoint, this episode really resonated with me. And I thought, you made a good point of saying, we're getting down to the wire here, no pun intended. I'm watching a lot of The Wire lately. And they needed to, I think, take a minute and do something heartfelt with the show before they ran out of time. Because there was a lot of goofy this season as well. So I really like this one. Anything else on this before we hit our very last episode to talk about?
I wish there was more, but we have to get to this point at some point.
Yep, this is our very last show. Again. So, what has been established up to this point, as we start to roll up the carpet and close the door, is that everyone's going to move away. Steve is going to move in to an already crowded house.
Crowded house.
Ramona, Kimmy, and Fernando are going to move to Palo Alto because they are opening up another Monty's there. And okay, let me address this now. Them moving because they're establishing another Monty's in another part of the city to where it would make no sense for Fernando to commute, I was fine with. Thought it was weird, a weird choice because Ramona is, I think, like a junior and she's so close to finishing high school. But whatever, this happens. God help you if you've got parents in the army. You move all the time. My wife, when she was a kid, I think spent her senior year in a school in Japan because her dad had to move. These things happen, so I kind of get it. The one that I didn't get was, so that meant that Jimmy was going to be managing Monty's by himself, the original location. And so that meant they had to move out of the house to move closer to the store. And I'm like, where the fuck is this deli?
The store that's been established as being in the neighborhood that they all loved and patronized for how long?
No, so it's like the reaction to Kimmy, who's moving to Palo Alto, I get it. They're moving away, in ways and quotes. But, like, Stephanie and Jimmy could have bought the house next door. What difference did this make? And they're acting like they're moving, across the country. Whatever. That was their reasoning. They're moving out to start their own lives. There's no reason for them to live in this house forever as a married couple. That made a little bit more sense to me. Their reasoning to do it so that Jimmy could be closer to the original Monty's. It's kind of weak sauce, but I'll accept it for now. They do a lot of chicanery. Well, let me stop there and bring you into this. These established reasons for having to break up our cast. Did you have a hard time swallowing it like I did?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay. You have any idea why you think they went in that direction? Like why they didn't come up with better reasons for people to move if they were going to do that?
Honestly, no. And that's kind of the sad part is they teased this various times in the original show that somebody was going to be moving out at a certain point. So it starts with where Jesse kind of gets his lifestyle cramped and he can't really take it. He doesn't have the freedom he used to have, and now these girls are part of his life. So he decides that he ultimately reneges on it. He does it again when he gets married, obviously, and it's time to start my own life and my own family. And then it's like, oh no, we're going to change that, and we're gonna stay here and raise our family here. And there various point. There's one part where somebody's going to buy the house and they're all going to move into their own places. It's very, they always teased it and never went with it, but at least there was usually, with the exception of the last one, more than a build. But at least in that last episode, that's how the episode started, and they built around it and eventually came to a conclusion. Then you have this episode where all of a sudden it's just like, hey, by the way. What?
Yeah. Sorry, swallowed wrong.
That's okay.
It seemingly came out of left field. The explanations themselves were kind of ridiculous. But it's like, okay. I guess if they ever came back, they didn't want to have everybody living in another part of the country. You know, maybe they will get a Christmas episode or something. Whatever. We leave that for a while. We do the elongated wedding episode. They did a really cute thing with the kids. Talk about that for a minute. So, Jackson is with Roxy. They've established that those two are an actual couple. Roxy's not ashamed to be out in public with them anymore. But then Lola comes back. And of course, Jackson being a dude, and Lola being his first love of sorts, can't get his chin off the ground. And so, of course, Roxy is insulted. Why wouldn't you be? And then, and I must say, Popko, my goodness, that kid's going to be a model if he wants. Popko comes back, and Ramona does the same bit with her boyfriend, who is the Postmates driver, which is a really funny line about that, where Popko starts walking away, and he's like, hey, why did you invite my Postmates driver here? Yeah, so I'll stop there and bring you back in here. The bit with the kids and the girlfriends and why? I guess to give the episode a little extra dramatic tension, something for the kids to do while they did this sort of wedding chicanery. What did you think of all that?
That at least was tolerable in this episode. That was probably the best part of the episode for me, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Just to see kids acting like kids in this odd situation, and despite the criticism of one, playing it off on the other, it was hysterical.
We get some returning appearances. We get Harry. We get Gia, Matt,
CJ,
yes,
but
they
we
all
get
come
some
back.
older guys from the original show too. We get Viper and Dwayne,
Okay.
who you would only notice if you saw them, because I would assume they may have had a line or two in the actual episode, but they were probably cut. But they were noticeable in the crowd shots if you were a fan of the original show. Viper being the last serious boyfriend DJ had at the end of the show before Steve made a dramatic return to take her to prom, and Dwayne being Kimmy's one and only steady beau during the show, whose famous line is always, whatever. And he's played by a very well-versed voice actor, Scott Menville, who, among other voices, has done stuff like Robin on Teen Titans, and in all the Teen Titans media that they do. He did, if you were a fan of the show Mission Hill, he was the voice of Kevin French. He's done a ton of voices.
All right, very good. And then we get Vicky, who is still friends with Danny. One of the shtick things in this is they don't have an officiant. They end up getting Joey McIntyre, and of course, a lot of the gags in the show revolve around them being fans of New Kids on the Block, so that was fun. You want to speak on that at all?
No.
Good. Moving on. All right. So we finally come to it. We have our wedding. It's all wonderful. You know, happy endings are lovely, and everyone gets their dream boat, and we are racing towards the end of this series. Now, we've done our goodbyes. Everyone's packed up. Everyone's leaving. We have really... And again, I was enjoying it up to this point. I really didn't have a problem. I mean, I thought the reasons they were all leaving were kind of dumb. But I'll allow them if you stick the landing. And now it comes to it. Everyone's left the house. They've said their goodbyes. They've hugged, they've cried. DJ, in kind of a Sam Malone Cheers moment, for you kids, Cheers was a long-running sitcom that took place at a bar in Boston. And at the end of Cheers, Sam says, he's looking around an empty bar, and he says, I'm the luckiest man in the world. That's actually the second time this year I've made that reference. DJ is walking around this empty house, and instead of just having her walk off camera and roll credits or, have her give a line, thank you, fuck you, something, the girls walk back in. Kimmy and Stephanie do. And they go, we don't want to go. Can we stay? This is after DJ admits to them that it is because of them she's able to stand on her own now, accept love in her life, move on from being a widow, and move forward in life. People are progressing here. We are moving onward and upward in the world. This is how the show was written. And they turn around and erased it all in one foul swoop. Kimmy and Stephanie say, can we stay? And DJ says yes! What the hell, man? We were doing so well. That ruined, and I'll get to the next thing in a moment with Stephanie.
Yeah.
Which I like. I don't hate as much as I hated them staying, but it's not good either. It was like a 1-2 punch of stupidity. But, Pat, what the hell, man? We were going in the right direction, I think. They were doing the right thing. Why take us down this gilded path only to undercut it at the end and be like, fuck it, we're staying? And all the stuff they talked about independence and being there for each other and ready to move on, goes completely out the window like it never happened. Why, Pat? Why?
Hey, if you're looking for me to rationalize it, I'm not the guy. I don't see why they did any of this, nor how it made any sense personally. I thought it stunk. I thought it really cheapened the entirety of what they were trying to build, and had in many ways built and succeeded at building. I don't have any. I got nothing for as to why this was done, how they thought it made sense, or that it's what people wanted to see.
Yeah, I mean, the only way it makes sense is if they thought they were coming back from possibly another season. But Netflix told them they were done. They saw the end of the tunnel coming. Did they think they could shop this around? And be like, let's not close the book on it just yet. Maybe ABC picks it up. Maybe Disney Plus picks it up. I just don't understand. Well, this is Warner Brothers. Maybe it ends up on the CW. I don't understand what the rationale, other than these are cowards, and they just think the audience didn't want it to end, so they said, whatever, Natalie Merchant, give them what they want. It's the only plausible explanation for writing that's this bad. And I know people are like, this bad. Calm the fuck down, Radulich. It's Fuller House. The writing on this show, at the level we are talking about, the family sitcom, we've talked about it for 5 previous shows. It was fine. The writing was fine for this show for what it was supposed to be. This was bad for this level of that kind of show. I was thoroughly disgusted.
Not good.
But we're not done. Because after they've spent 2 or 3 seasons talking about how Stephanie can't have a baby...
Yeah, what the hell?
She's pregnant after all that. That's the final word on the subject. Stephanie's pregnant, we'll credit.
There's a less logical pregnancy than Mae Young's. And she had a hand.
Let's all give Mae Young a great big hand. Wah wah. You want to talk about, like, fucking the dog on your way out the door. This was awful. I mean, a show that we've praised. I feel cheated, quite frankly. I personally feel cheated.
Not a fan.
All right, Pat. I don't even know what to say. I'll give you the last word.
Do I have to?
One of us has
What the
to.
hell? I'll let you guys know now. Mark, I'm moving in and I'm pregnant.
Terrific. You can help me raise my 2 children.
Yeah, I'll live in an alcove and make questionable decisions and bad jokes.
Perfect. Well, this is Florida. I definitely don't have a basement. Very disappointing. They did not stick the landing. It's unfortunate. This was a talented group of people. They let this one get away, and I don't even know what to say. So if you've got nothing else, Pat, we'll close up shop here.
Well, are we going to announce our next TV project?
I'm getting to it.
Oh, boy.
So I had a coworker refer to me as passively antagonistic, which I thought was a fair representation of my personality.
Wonder what you think of me.
Aggressively antagonistic, I would imagine. So I saw an article today, and it said that because of the socio-political climate we are currently in, such as it is, that Amazon Prime was probably going to do away with the Dukes of Hazzard. Doesn't seem to have happened yet. Haven't checked. And I'm sure I could find it elsewhere if I really wanted to. But Dukes of Hazzard, with their Confederate flag, General Lee, car, and some might say anachronistic values and themes and settings, is probably going to fall into the waste bin of history because it is not culturally sensitive in our current climate.
Right, but let's keep streaming that upstanding citizen Bill Cosby. Good choice, Amazon.
So I said to Pat, kind of off the cuff, I said, I kind of now want to talk about this show just to annoy people. And Pat said, good enough for me. So our next TV party that we have scheduled for the month of July, July 23rd, as a matter of fact, we are going to do a TV party for the entire Dukes of Hazzard series. I don't think we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time talking about Coy and Vance, but, you know, they were there.
I
will
won't
be
spend any
addressed.
time talking about Coy and Vance.
Oh, I will mention them, but we don't have to talk about them a lot. You don't even have to watch them. I will. I will take one for the team because I'm a completist and I can't help it. But that being the case, yes, we will stand in the face of cultural sensitivity and political correctness and say, you can't tell me what to do. You're not my mom. And we're going to talk about...
just to clarify, I hated this show.
Did you really?
I hated Dukes of Hazzard when I was a kid. I would be watching TNN because my dad would subject me to the show Dallas. So I know far more about the original run of Dallas than anybody should. But when Dallas was over at noon, and it's like 2-hour block or whatever it was, all of a sudden it was those Duke boys. And good Lord, I accidentally happened to watch a full episode of it as a child, and I thought it was the worst crap I'd ever saw. Mind you now, I'm a huge fan of John Schneider, mostly from his portrayal of Jonathan Kent on Smallville. And I think he plays a great role in the haves and the have-nots. And I think he's a terrific actor. That show was torturous for me as a child, other than Waylon Jennings singing the theme song.
I loved it.
But I'm going to watch it because I am an American and I have freedoms, and I don't believe that a TV show like that should be making anybody cry unless they realize it's just a terrible show.
I was home one day watching Dukes of Hazzard, which was at that point in syndication. So I was probably in high school at the time. It might have been like on TV Land or something. And I remember watching it as a kid. I have enough memories of that. And even though I wasn't allowed to stay up that late to watch it consistently, occasionally, like a parent does, you let your kids stay up. I used to watch that, the A-Team, Knight Rider. I loved, as a kid, the Dukes of Hazzard. So, 2 years later, as I said, I'm on the couch and I'm in my den watching a rerun of the show because there must have not been anything else on at the time. And my father walks in and says, like, what are you watching? I'm like, oh, I'm watching an old rerun of the Dukes of Hazzard. And he looks at me, and he looks at the TV, and he looks at me again. And with much disgust, he turns around, walks back up the stairs, and I hear him mumble, I have no son. And it's with that in mind that I fully embrace this idea and endorse it wholeheartedly. We will talk about the entire Dukes of Hazzard series, including, not limited to, Coy and Vance. So, look for that July 23rd. But before that...
look for 90% of my positive commentary to be about Catherine Bach.
And her Daisy Dukes. Did you have the Dukes of Hazzard record? I did. I
most certainly did not.
Oh, I had the LP, Pat. Yes, sir. My old dog. His name is Flash. I don't know why, because he ain't too fast. That's right.
No, I had Night Rocker by David Hasselhoff.
Oh, well, aren't you special? Yes, I had the Dukes of Hazzard soundtrack where Roscoe Pico Train sang a song about his slow-moving dog. Yes, sir. Boss Hogg also sang a song on that album. Love the shit. I might have to do a Metal Hammer of Doom on it now. Just cause. Alright, silliness aside. If you're looking for more of me and Pat, and why wouldn't you be, we are going to tackle the next chapter in our boxing series on July 16th, the week before we do Dukes of Hazzard. We'll be looking at the Muhammad Ali years, the post-Vietnam comeback. And I think that's it for you. I think you're done until then. Yes, indeedy. So, you got anything going on? You got me into these ICW New York no holds barred things, and then every time I bring it up, you scoff. What happened there?
Have you not seen who's booked on this? Like, the concept initially was fun, and I got to watch the first show, unfortunately not live, but parts of the first show after the fact, and it was okay. And then I looked at who they booked, and I was like, why are they doing this? Why would I ever want to watch this type thing?
Okay. So they've lost you because they don't have guys you like to see wrestle?
It's funny how that works out.
Yep. Well, the last time I watched one of these, I saw Alex Colon pour what appeared to be bleach and probably wasn't, but it was pretending to be bleach all over Casanova Valentine's face, and that's how he won his match. I'm hooked. So, no coverage or anything, but, I'll be watching and talking up these deathmatch shows coming up the end of June, beginning of July. The Backyard Wrestling show is back. July 4th. Did you see the news? Game Changer Wrestling's Backyard Wrestling show? Huh? July 4th?
I did. A friend of mine probably is going to be working it.
Oh, sweet. So, are you going to watch?
Probably not.
Oh. You going to watch Emmanuel Navarrete versus Uriel Lopez?
I'm going to try to, yes.
Oh, good. So will I. Hot dog. So at least there's that. That's the same night as Blades versus Volkov over on ESPN for the UFC. All right. In the meantime, in between time, we did a comic strip last night, myself and Alexis Hana, for the last days of American Crime. You should definitely listen to the podcast, but skip the movie. It stinks.
Wow.
Yeah, it was not good. Myself and the Posman reviewed NXT TakeOver in Your House. We had a lot of fun with that. Pat
We're in your house.
What now?
We're in your house.
Yeah, that's right. Pat and I did our chapter on Smokin' Joe Frazier. Jesse and I reviewed Ailstorm, Curse of the Crystal Coconut. Myself,
Wait, Ailstorm or Hailstorm?
Ale, like beer.
Oh, okay.
Myself and Robert Winfrey spent damn near 3 hours talking about Devilman Crybaby. And finally, myself and Alexis Hana reviewed Catwoman When in Rome. Next week, we've got a review of Artemis Fowl, which apparently is stinking up Disney+. Not that anyone suspected any differently. The Podsman will be reviewing WWE Backlash. Myself and Jesse will be reviewing Termion Cadillac Global Warning. And that's about it for that week. So, Pat, unless you've got something you want to plug, we're going to get on out of here now.
Mark, just be ready for a very long episode when it comes to Ali, the final chapter.
Yes, sir. We will make the time. We will have the details, and a fun time will be had by all. Until then, for the punchy pugilist Pat Mullin, we are no longer everywhere you look. Be well, be safe, and behave.